I've felt this way watching him for a long time. He is very adventurous by his own blue line. He takes the puck up high by the
Sure
offensive
is.
blue line. He
Yeah,
really
no
dances
question.
with the offensive blue line. And if he
Yes, he
gets,
does.
poked, stolen, the puck gets taken away from him there, it's going to turn into a breakaway the other way. And that's been something he's walked that tightrope for a while. Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Sign up for a premium membership. You can get all of my writing about the NHL and the Bruins sent straight to your inbox via the Substack newsletter. You can also find my stuff on bostonsportsjournal.com. After every Bruins game, I write a column. Writing alongside staff members there like Greg Bedard, Mike Giardi, a great group that Greg Bedard has writing about all the Boston sports. So they've all got you covered there. So check that out. This is the 49th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I have with me friend and colleague Mick Colageo. Mick, let everybody know where they can find your work, my friend.
My Rink Rap blog, you can me on Twitter, X, at Mick Colageo, and contribute to BostonHockeyNow.com with a weekend column on the Bees, and I contribute seasonally to the Hockey News, and I do podcasts with Hags.
Very nice. Yes, Mick is worldwide and all over the place, and we love that. There's plenty of Mick to go around, hockey knowledge wise, and he does it well.
Hey,
Let's
Keith
thank
Shepard says hi. I was
let's
just
thank
on with Keith Shepard.
That's right. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Delicious flavor-packed options on the menu. Vegan, calorie smart, vegan plus, protein plus, all this good stuff. Ready in 2 minutes. Throw them in the microwave. They're delicious. Head to factormeals.com/Hags50 and use code Hags50 to get 50% off your first box. And of course, FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Just download the app, bet on player props, spreads, over-unders, so much more. Visit fanduel.com/Boston and just get involved with the NHL, the NBA, the NFL. So much good sports going on right now. FanDuel Sportsbook has you covered. All right. Let's get into it, Mick. Boston Bruins, I think since the last time we spoke, they had a dud of a loss to the Sabres and then a decent win over the weekend against the Coyotes team. Just your thoughts on where the team is right now, as it seems like they're going on the road for a couple games, and it seems like injuries are starting to creep in a little bit.
Yeah, creep in, and but what the word we're getting is that McAvoy is not going to be a long-term thing. Zaka is not going to be a long-term thing. So, but if these things do linger, then yeah, now you're going to have your depth tested in a way that you haven't seen this happen with this team in a long time, because depth has really been their thing, and you're kicking forward players, and now instead of having a first line, 2/3 and a fourth, you're going to wind up with 3/3 and a fourth, and and then you're going to get to that point in the season where you can't score goals. So,
Yep.
um, and that happens mid-season to a lot of teams. If it happens to the Bruins, then their defensive structure needs to be better than it's been on average this season.
Yeah, and the Zaka one in particular, like McAvoy, he already had a 4-game suspension. There's been small pockets where they've had to get by without him. I think long term, you're right. If he were missing, it would be probably the biggest loss they would have on that roster as far as a player they couldn't really replace. But they've shown short term they can get by without him, and they have pretty good defenseman depth. Zaka is the one that I look at as potentially very challenging if he misses a few games, just because of everything he does for this team, of the minutes that he plays, of the lack of real frontline center options that they have to play like a featured top 6 role. Your forward depth is not that great to begin with, and it really gets stretched thin if Pavel Zacha is not out there playing 18 to 20 minutes a night. Putting him into all kinds of different situations that they put him into, and relying on him for so much. So I think that's one to really watch among the forwards when he's out, to see how everybody slots in and how they perform.
I agree. I'm intrigued by this latest opportunity for Morgan Geeky to get some traction. and
Yep.
play with some top six talent. He's a totally different kind of player. He's that guy who bumps into every piece of furniture when he walks into a house and knocks over chairs, but the puck seems to follow him. He has a knack for this. It's a little reminiscent of Terry O'Reilly, and I don't want to put that kind of pressure on the guy, but I like the fact that the Bruins have a scenario that's going to get them to see what it looks like when they get more physicality, hockey wise, into their top six. Now that's being leveraged upon them, but I hope they're taking notes because he adds something. So if they can figure out a way to keep him around, or at least put it in the thought in their head that they could use a player like that in their top six with maybe a greater talent level, then and target that going forward, then that could do a lot for this hockey team, in my opinion. But yeah, I agree with you. Zacha's a rare bird. He can skate with those horses. He was number 6 in the 15 draft for a reason, and got a beautiful stride. And when the game opens up for him, he can carry the mail with those guys. So it's fun to see him play when the game gets quick.
Yeah,
And,
and he's got a great shot when he gets it on net too. And he hustles, plays the 200-foot game, back checks hard. Like Pavel Zacha is a smart player. He's a good all-around player. You're absolutely right. You can see why he was a first-round talent, even if he didn't immediately click when he was with the New Jersey Devils. Morgan Geeky, he's the perfect example of a player that injury is going to allow him an opportunity now to do a little bit more and show a little bit more, and he needs to. It's incumbent upon him to seize that moment and show what he can do and really step up his game. I think he's been fine since he's been with the Bruins. He's had shifts and moments where you look at him and say that was a really good play here. I can see why they like him there. Little things that he does, I think you notice a little bit, but by and large, he hasn't been much of an impact to me on a consistent basis. And he did miss some time with injury. But this is his chance to really step up and start to forge his identity with the Boston Bruins, which I don't think he really has yet. So I agree with you. This is definitely a moment for him to step up and do something, as it always is when somebody gets injured, gets hurt. It creates an opportunity for somebody else, and I would agree that he's one of those guys right now that's going to get that chance. Really, the biggest thing I've noticed with him or observed with him is that he's had pretty good chemistry with Matt Poitras when the two of them have played together, and Poitras's been the center. I think he's done well when they play together as a duo, and that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed about him, aside from what you're talking about, which is he has that sort of like fight through bodies, plays through bodies to get to pucks, kind of, slams into people, like definitely plays a little bit of a physical game. I have noticed all that stuff with him, but it hasn't led to a ton aside from, a few individual plays here or there when you noticed him.
I love that Pasternak goal where he wrapped it. He picked up the puck in the blue, wrapped it around the goalie's left pad and inside the right post. Geeky is the guy who opens that up.
Yep.
He goes right straight through, bull in a china shop. And yeah, there are going to be some goalie interference penalties along the way with a guy like that, probably, but he's not a torpedo. He doesn't move that fast. He kind of does it more 1970s, 80s style. And I like the knack that he has for making those kinds of things happen, and it probably really helps Poitras and open space for him to have a guy like Geeky who's all knees and elbows and shoulders and banging his way through and making things happen for a kid who has so many creative ideas like Poitras.
Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than NFL. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including you got spreads, you got your player props, you got over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Yeah, and speaking of Poitras, that's somebody I definitely want to talk about today. Healthy scratched against Buffalo last week, which Jim Montgomery said was the plan all along, or had been for at least a couple weeks. And I intermittently, I do think we will see him healthy scratched from time to time. And then he was not part of the players that were on the ice, the forwards that were on the ice in the third period of that win over the Arizona Coyotes. They weren't playing for a few days, so Jim Montgomery really shortened the bench and made sure that he had a strong third period with the guys he felt were going. Matt Poitras was not one of them, even though earlier in the game he made a nice play that led to the Danton Heinen goal. I really think he created that with his willingness to, win a battle, poke a puck ahead, and get it to Heinen and give him a free and clear path to the net. So, he still makes those plays, either setting up his teammates or doing something for himself intermittently. You see it from time to time. But I did break down the numbers, and it's the last 13, 14 games as opposed to the first 11, 12. It's been a lot quieter offensively for him. I think he has hit a little bit of a valley, rookie wall, or whatever you want to call it, where the rigors of the 82 game schedule and, playing all the time instead of what he's used to with junior hockey, which essentially was like a college schedule where they practiced all week and played on the weekends. I think now being in the middle of, the first like 3 months of the NHL rigors has really started to, drain him a little bit. And, he had a meeting with Jim Montgomery after this latest game where he was sat in the third period. And the two messages that he took from that meeting with Jim Montgomery were he needs to shorten his shifts significantly and be mindful of that. And he also needs to pick his spots when he really makes high risk offensive plays and where he tries to do things. And I've felt this way watching him for a long time. He is very adventurous by his own blue line. He takes the puck up high by the offensive blue line. He really dances with the offensive blue line. And if he gets, poked, stolen, if the puck gets taken away from him there, it's going to turn into a breakaway the other way. And that's been something he's walked that tightrope for a while. But just in general,
there's a way that Brad Marchand is not the ideal leader. It's that. It's that Marchand is a risk taker in those situations. He will even go down to point of no speed and just challenge the player to knock him over and take the puck away and then turn his body and keep going forward. If he doesn't, it's a breakaway. And it's amazing that, this is what Poitras has to watch. Now, granted, he's learning from great players like him and Pasternak who do these things, but he can't be doing it in close games, in third periods, and not near the end of his shift. It's a bad culture to develop.
It is. And the shift length is another thing that you just in general, you've got to be very mindful of at the NHL level. Because to his point, and he's right, it not only affects the shift that particular shift when you're out there, but it can start to affect you for the rest of the period, the rest of the game, if you really gas yourself with a long shift or two, and you have a hard time recovering from that moving forward, and it affects your game. So this is part of the 19-year-old learning curve for Matt Poitras that I think everybody expected. But just what you think you're seeing out of him right now, and whether anything that you're seeing right now at a little bit of a valley when he was at a peak earlier in the season changes your ideas about what they're going to get out of him this year, or the long range prognosis for this season for Matt Poitras.
Yeah, for this year, it kind of sobering when you consider just the rookie season. In the scope of his career, not phased in the least as part of the cycle. He's just reaching lately deeper and deeper into his bag of tricks, because things that were working for him in the first month and a half of the season are not working right now, because teams have had chances to watch video, to study and say, hey, every time he gets the puck right here, this is what he does. So what we want to do is blah, blah, blah. This is what they do all their meetings about. And so, a guy like him is now being challenged to have a fourth and a fifth and a sixth thought. And now at the same time, he's got Montgomery telling him, please, when you get late in games, you get late in shifts, you got to simplify. Okay, if I simplify, now what am I doing? It's an awful lot. It's a storm in a kid's head like that. And if you don't have the right personality to endure it and keep on pressing forward, I think I like about Poitras is he doesn't seem hung up that way. He didn't seem to have to not care what the coach says or what happens on the ice to his team when he's out there in order to keep going forward. He seems to be able to engage listen, and then keep on pressing forward and do it with energy. That's what I like about him is every time I think, oh God, here comes the fade, it doesn't. He pushes again. So I'm
Yep.
really encouraged by that. And so I'm not writing him off. My overall outlook is if he's in the top 9 when the Bruins get to the playoffs, it needs to be a more successful version of him than what we're seeing right now. Otherwise, it was a deadline fail. So
Yeah.
that having been said, he might be a better version of himself by then. He's a long season.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's fair to assume he will be a better version of himself. Certainly a little more pro hockey polished version of himself where he's doing some of these right things, knows the game situation, knows what, where he is in the game, what's going on, and tailors a little bit of what he does according to that. Because I got to imagine at 19 years old, he's a kid that has not been told by too many hockey coaches too many times in his life to simplify things. And they allow him to make the high wire act and make the difficult play and to make the creative play because he can do it and because he was able to do it probably at every level that he had done before, even in those game situations where maybe other players you'd be telling to simplify. And that's an adjustment for all these guys when they get to the NHL level, when they've been able to do certain things their entire career that now they don't necessarily have the ability to do because of the level of players that they're playing against. So that
For
that'll
some,
be
it
pretty.
ruins. Some
Yeah.
players are ruined by that dominance. They never got to learn how to play the game the way kids play soccer in South America, passing the ball on the beach,
Yep.
and not ever have the glue in their game that a superstar kid might have in a kick and run game. But with Poitras, I don't get that vibe that
No.
this is, but I think you make a great point here because even though he's not in that class of player that gets ruined by his dominance and can't adjust to the pro game, it's still a thing. It's still something you got to go through. And
For
whatever
sure.
small increments, that's just part of that whole thing that's happening to him right now. And he's handling it great as far as I'm concerned. And I really love what I've seen. And but when you say, okay, let's play armchair GM, what's gonna be the deal? What are we gonna have for a hockey widget when the time comes? We're gonna make decisions. Well, that's all a different kind of question because we
It
don't
is.
know at that time what he'll be at that point, whether or not they need to take advantage of where they are in the standings and make a move.
Yeah. Potentially, but I still look at the whole season as a season of adjustment, transition, and I don't think they need to go for broke at the deadline for anything. I think if this turns into a learning experience for Matt Poitras, they get a round or two of the playoffs, and sort of everybody takes that one step forward. I actually think that's probably in the long range the best thing for the organization. But we'll see what happens when they get to that point later on down the line, and if it's a player that factors into their long-term view and a player they're going to keep around for a while, maybe that changes things a little bit. That'll be interesting to watch. One other player I kind of wanted to talk about over the last few weeks, I think has really started to show more and show, the player that he's been other places in the past is Kevin Shattenkirk. I thought he's played some very good hockey recently. He credited a meeting with Jim Montgomery where Montgomery told him to, take more risks offensively, to use his skill a little bit more, to, take chances to create plays. And you've started to see it more, whether it's, going backdoor and scoring goals, whether it's, trying to keep pucks alive in the offensive zone, different things that he's shown that where he's a smart, very good hockey player. When he's gotten a couple of chances to be on that top power play unit, I think he's looked very good. And I think, it was part of the reason they brought him in was for his power play acumen. And I think he showed it at times here recently. And it's a positive thing. And not only that, but the game McAvoy got hurt, I think he played 22 minutes. He's able to step up and play bigger minutes and play a bigger role in smaller doses when things like that happen. And I think that's an invaluable thing to have as a third pairing defenseman, a guy that can step up and for small stretches play in a top four role. So I think you've started to see a lot more of the value of Kevin Shattenkirk in that role, even if you also saw how good Connor Clifton can be in that game that they played against Buffalo, where I thought he made some really impactful plays for the Sabres to win that game. So, good stretch here for Kevin Shattenkirk.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is all class. He blamed himself for the shift he got scored on that he got caught. And he wasn't being asked about the play, but he pointed it out as an example of what can go wrong when you press forward like that.
Yep.
And so I like what he's brought to the team. I wouldn't mind seeing more of him on the power play because I just feel like he's got so much savvy.
Yep.
All apologies to the actual number 91 savvy. But Kevin Shattenkirk's a very savvy presence on this team. So he doesn't have the speed to recover if he gets in a bad spot. But it's interesting that Montgomery wants this team, even if it's a 1-goal game, midway third period, he wants them to, and you don't have McAvoy. And he's like, no, we're still going to play 4-man attack.
Yep.
Well, I still want, if you're a defenseman, if you got an open lane to join the attack, get down and become a passing target and go to the net I want you to do it. So that's the way he wants them to play. It's high risk. It's high reward. It's not helter-skelter. It's not pond hockey, but it is a high risk, high reward kind of a game that he's got them playing. It's interesting that it's fun to watch, but it's really volatile. it's so I don't know.
It is, and it puts a lot of pressure on your goaltenders. I mean, they're up for the task most nights, but like he definitely, and when you don't have the personnel like you did last year, and you still continue to play that style, it puts a lot more strain on your defense and your goaltending for sure.
Yeah, he's not letting injuries, suspensions, or anything change how this team plays.
No,
if you're missing your number one here, your number one there, he's like, no, we're doing it. So really interesting, fun team to watch, the Bruins. More fun than I thought they'd be in that regard. That said, Shattenkirk's been a good addition. I miss Cliffy. He played the game of his life in Boston last week. Granted, he hasn't had as good a season as what we saw in that game. But that was a heck of a performance by him.
It was, and it showed off everything he does well. He played physical. He made a play on that Tage Thompson goal.
The pinch. He cut off Lindholm's clearing pass, and then he centered to the high slot. Bang.
Yep.
Primary
Great play, and he buried Shattenkirk actually.
That was a heck of a thump.
The sequence that changed the game. He buries Shattenkirk when the play's in front of the Buffalo net and they're scrambling to try to score the Bruins, and then that turns into Victor Olofsson scoring at the other end, and that was basically game over at that point. That was the sequence that turned the game, and he was a big part of that. And then we've talked about this numerous times, that kind of defenseman that's willing to bury somebody in front of the net when that melee is going on is something that they are kind of missing this year, and they have not had enough of. And he kind of showed right then and there in that sequence something that the Bruins don't have enough of on their back end this year.
Well, on the right shot, you've had this incredible physicality in your depth for a long time. You go back to Adam McQuaid's successor Kevin Miller, and or they alternated in and out of the lineup. Rarely did they both ever play, and now Cliffy hockey era has ended, and now we get a completely different widget there in Shattenkirk. Maybe this team needs that more than they do a physical guy in a third pairing role. I wouldn't mind more physicality in the top four, though.
No, definitely, and certainly when McAvoy and Forward are missing like they are right now, you're missing some physicality and some size and strength on the back end, and it's going to be noticeable when both of those players are out.
We do have Factor Meals to help us out. America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit when it does get busy, when it does get crazy, when we do need a quick meal. They fuel you up fast with flavorful and nutritious ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Takes less than 2 minutes to cook them. They're fresh, never frozen, meals ready in 2 minutes, like I said. They have calorie conscious options, going upscale with some of the things they're offering now, like surf and surf meal options, roasted garlic, filet mignon, and shrimp, and Cajun spiced shrimp and salmon, which is like right in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So it's got everything for everybody. There's 34 plus chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options for meals. You can get snacks, you can get breakfast items. Like it's a great deal. So if you want to get Factor meals, go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use the code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. It's a great deal. I've tried it. It's fantastic. I recommend it to you. We love these ready to make meal kits, especially when we're on the go with our kids. So one more time, that's factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. You won't be sorry if you go to Factor Meals. It gets the Haggs thumbs up seal of approval.
Jesper Boqvist, a little bit of Bruins news, called up to the team on Tuesday, I believe it was. This is a sign to me that Pavel Zacha is going to be, obviously probably out for the next game or two at the very least. And he goes in. Just anything that you've sort of noticed about Jesper Boqvist in his time with the Bruins, because I got to be honest with you, I felt like I've not noticed him much when he's been out there. I feel like it's been a fairly nondescript game that he's played. I was told about his speed before he got here, that you would notice that. I haven't really noticed anything with him to this point. Anything that you've noticed or noted with Jesper Boqvist?
I think he's wicked fast. Yeah. I do think this kid can ramp it up really quick with speed and make the American League look slow. But what does it translate to for him? It hasn't translated with when speed is your calling card and it doesn't get you to a point of impact on a hockey game, then what else do you do?
Right.
And that's the question with him right now. He needs to find a way to show that he can play a strong two-way game in a depth role with that speed and use it defensively and engage people. He's very slightly built, but man, can he fly. So I was really kind of hoping that we'd be seeing Georgie E. Merkelov after what Mark Dibber had to say last edition of your podcast that I was on, that Merkelov is playing a terrific two-way game. And I was thinking, this would be, I could stand to see that right now and see what would happen there. But I'm still on the Merkelov bandwagon. But Boqvist, I know one thing for sure. You get him on your team, you didn't get any slower.
No, that is true.
What it translates to, I have no idea.
Yeah, and it's obviously more difficult for him to do something impactful if he's playing more of like a fourth line role. We'll see if he gets featured a little bit more in a role higher in the lineup, or something different is in line for him this time around if and when he gets in. But we'll see. If you've got to do something else besides have great speed, like I've pointed this guy out a few times, but Daniel Paille is a guy that had great speed, and that was part of the reason that I think he had an impact in the fourth line. It was not just the speed, though, it was the aggressiveness and the way that he played. He played with some abandon in his game, where he would really attack people with the speed, and you noticed him more because he would put himself into offensive situations and get himself into good spots because he used his speed and aggressiveness as a real tool and a weapon against other teams. And you want to see
overtime winner in Chicago.
Yep. You want to see a guy like Boqvist be able to do that a little bit more when he's up at the NHL level. All right, Twitter question of the week, Mick, and this plays into a interesting week for the NHL, where they really came down hard on a couple of players that were trying to defend injured teammates or defend themselves after bad hits. We saw David Perron get suspended for 6 games, and I didn't even realize this when I watched it, that he cross-checked somebody in the head that didn't even have anything to do with the play, kind of like a stray bullet, innocent bystander situation where Dylan Larkin goes down, gets hit, knocked out, whatever.
And he was shaking up the first person he saw. Yeah.
Exactly. He just goes after the first guy he sees, and I understand a little bit more why they threw the book at him with 6 games, because that's what he did.
Off the top rope.
But the one I really had issues with him getting suspended at all was Eric Branson getting hit by Nick Cousins, who is becoming kind of a cheap shot artist, turtle sort of character for the Florida Panthers. And he hit Branson from behind, clear into the boards, hit his head into the glass. And then Branson tries to get at him right afterwards. And of course, the refs get in the way and won't let Branson get a piece of Cousins.
He got a feel before he did. I mean,
Yeah, not much though. Like considering how much,
pounded.
considering how dangerous the hit was, I think he really wanted to send a
It
message.
really looked like Cam Neely and Claude Lemieux.
Yeah, but the second time around, he went after him. It was Cam Neely on Claude Lemieux. It was Sean Thornton on Brooks Orpik. It was somebody that was like pounding somebody else down on the ice when he was in the turtle position and not wanting to defend himself.
Thornton with one punch knockout.
It was.
That was my favorite part about the Thornton Orpik thing is Thornton, after he realizes he knocked him out, he looks sideways like, I can't believe it. I didn't mean to do that.
Well, he said it out. I remember him saying that to me later on. He goes, I know when I put somebody to sleep. I don't think I hit him hard enough to put him to sleep. And, he was like convinced that it was an acting lesson by Brooks Orpik, and that it wasn't
brown bearded.
Yeah, truly one of those situations where he knocks somebody out. But who knows what actually happened there? We'll never know the truth. The Swine 15 on Twitter said they threw out Hathaway for a clean hit on Luke Hughes. That was actually a play where Hathaway on an icing call. I thought he hit him before the whistle. The ref blew the whistle on icing. I think it was more the ref's fault for like the slow whistle on the icing. But it was an icing play where Hathaway hit Luke Hughes. He gets thrown out of the game. But I think
conversation.
Yes, but I think that was a controversial one that Tortorella was hot about afterwards. But they threw out Hathaway for a clean hit on Luke Hughes, laugh out loud. They punished the result, not the act. Does Branson have to be paralyzed for them to call a major here? And this plays into them. They did call a major on the ice, and then they rescinded it to a 2-minute boarding. And that is part of what led Branson, I think, to go after him again later, was he felt like the refs didn't protect him, that the league didn't protect him by calling it a major and throwing out Nick Cousins. So he had to act on his own. And I understand all of this. He got suspended for 1 game for going after Nick Cousins the second time and being the aggressor, which is kind of a slap on the wrist for a guy like Branson. It's not that big a suspension, but I feel like I'm angry that he was suspended at all, because I think if somebody's trying to hurt you and you're not going to throw the book at that guy when they have a really dangerous hit like that from behind into the boards, you have to take matters into your own hands, especially if you're a guy like Branson and it's a guy like Cousins that never wants to fight his own battles and be accountable. Mick, your thoughts on all of this?
2 things. One, the league never wants to have to be embarrassed for not having taken care of something. So if you retaliate and go mayhem 84 Nordiques Canadian style, then you're going to put the league in a position where it has to send notice to everybody that, no, you let us take care of it. Whether you disagree with us or not, how we took care of it, you let us take care of it. The Bruins, unfortunately, abide by that way too much.
Yes.
And it pleased my old hockey fan soul to see a player say, no, enough. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but Sam Bennett, if he wants to get at somebody, he finds his way there.
Yep.
And he was one of the first guys to try to jump into the Cousins thing, and somebody grabbed him from behind and he went down, and kind of like, it didn't look to me like Sam Bennett was determined to get Branson off of Cousins.
Yeah.
It seemed to me like he was showing his bench, this is what we do when somebody jumps one of our guys, but somebody grabbed him and, when he went down in the heap.
Yep.
I might be reading too much into it, but I think a guy who plays the game is front door is Sam Bennett, probably doesn't like guys who play at back door.
Yes. Like Nick Cousins. Yes.
It makes you wonder what goes on in these guys' minds when you have the Bruins had a player in 1996-97 by the name of Trent McCleary, who threw clean hits as soon as the window to hit was closing. And a player was at that moment of, I got the puck, I passed the puck, I'm going to get hit. I guess I'm not going to get hit. Pow.
Yep.
And that's when they get hit. And he crafted that, and he got Jeff Odgers into a lot of fights. And Kelly Chase one night, when he was with the Hartford Whalers, after he tuned up Jeff Odgers, was almost in tears in their locker room afterwards, saying how much he loves and respects Jeff Odgers, and he feels so bad for him that he has to fight those battles for that blankety 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 blank.
Yeah.
And I asked McCleary about it in the dressing room one night, and he said, all my hits are clean. You disagree? And I said, it's not that they're not clean, it's that they're late. That was the end of the conversation.
I mean, if they're late, they're not clean, right?
Well, I think that when Sean McEachran didn't work out in 95, 96, Harry Sinden flipped him to Ottawa 1-for-1 for a guy who was making $110,000 a year, and figured that, well, at least this guy plays with P and V. We'll get him in our fourth line center, and then we'll have ourselves a line there. And he had it with Millette and Rogers and Odgers, I'm sorry. And the Bruins were, they were a bad hockey team that year, but they were fun to watch in that regard.
Mick, I love that you turned that Twitter question of the week into an old time hockey
It's a centennial season
with Jeff Odgers and Trent McCleary. I think that's awesome. All right, let's thank our sponsors real quick. Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, 34+ chef-prepared, dietitian-approved weekly options. There's always something new to try. Delicious, ready in 2 minutes. Head to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use code Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. And let's also thank FanDuel Sportsbook. Get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. The app is easy to use. Download it for spreads, player props, over-under, so much more. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get on the action with the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS network. Visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get right into the NHL mix. Mick Colageo